The 2024 NFL preseason for the San Francisco 49ers is officially done. I want to talk about some key takeaways from the live action that we saw from the San Francisco 49er players and how that will translate into the upcoming 2024 regular season. So with that being said, let's get into it, y'all. Yo, what's up, everybody? It's your boy, Ryan Tigey, back in action. What feels like forever, the longest San Francisco 49ers offseason, we can officially put that behind us. I'd be remiss without mentioning with some still looming issues as it relates to players and the contracts that we all know about, i.e. Brandon Aiyuk, i.e. Trent Williams. But there are some takeaways, some thoughts, some concerns, some excitement about what we can expect from the players that we saw and the players that we didn't see. What can we forecast into the regular season that is quickly approaching as the 49ers take on the New York Jets in week 1 on Monday Night Football? Cannot fucking wait. This definitely, without question, has felt like the longest offseason I can remember for quite some time. And it's still not over, unfortunately. But let's talk about the preseason. So the San Francisco 49ers finished off their third preseason game going up against the Las Vegas Raiders. It was a tie, which was annoying, but nonetheless, I'm just glad the preseason, it's done. So one of the things right off the bat is I'm worried about the 49ers defensive line depth. I'm not worried about the starters because I think they got a bunch of dogs that are going to be in the starting lineup for the San Francisco 49ers on the defensive line. Plus, we got Chris Kasarik, the best defensive line coach in the NFL.
Tight hands today, DJ. Tight hands on pad level. Just focus on it.
Yes, sir.
Tully, get him, Tully. Yeah, nice job there. How fast can you get your hands on him? How fast can you get his hands on him? Come on, get your hands on him. Hands!
So that's all good. But what I am concerned about is the depth. So as I've mentioned in other videos, I am fired up that the 49ers got Leonard Floyd, a guy who's been extremely durable throughout his entire NFL season, finished with 10.5 sacks last year, and a guy who is always on the field. Best ability is availability, which Leonard Floyd has been his entire career. But since coming on to the San Francisco 49ers, he's been battling some issues. My fingers are crossed that there are just nicks and bruises and nothing that is going to be substantially aggravating throughout the regular season. Because Lord knows, especially on the defensive end side, we need him and we're going to need him. The 49ers are going to need him. Nick Bosa, going to need him. Because when Leonard Floyd's out there, the length, the speed, how bendy he is, he can get to the fucking quarterback, especially when a lot of these teams are going to focus and throw other bodies on Nick Bosa. But nonetheless, I pray this isn't the year where his body starts to break down, because that could be a problem for the San Francisco 49ers. Another takeaway that I looked, because I saw a lot of rambling about Brock Purdy's first appearance in a preseason game, and it did not look good. Of course, there were no starters out there, specifically skill weapon wise. Yes, there were some starters on the offensive line, but outside of that, it was essentially a clusterfuck when Brock Purdy was out there. It didn't look great, but again, not concerning because we've seen what Brock Purdy can do on the field. And then leading up to this Raider game, Brock Purdy got some good action in there, and Brock Purdy was being Brock Purdy. He was out there running, gunning, slinging, looking like the Brock Purdy that we know and have witnessed over his course of his short playing career. And so Brock Purdy, he did some unbelievable scrambles using his legs, which is something I predict he's going to do more this season, is take off running when something's not there. As we all know, Brock Purdy, super decisive, elite at processing. So when it's not there, Brock Purdy, expect to see him take off more and use those legs like we saw in the preseason game going up against the Raiders. And that is going to be another weapon in the Brock Purdy toolbox. And one of the things that I can almost say with a high percentage, and I hate when national media always do the asterisk if they stay healthy. So I'm going to be hypocritical and use a caveat. If Kittle is on the field for the 49ers throughout the entire season, not missing any games or substantial amount of games, it is going to be the best Brock Purdy, George Kittle connection that we've seen. As we all know, they've already have elite chemistry, and I expect that to accelerate this year. One of the things that with not having Brandon Aiyuk in camp, and a lot of rookies coming in. Brock Purdy, he likes to go to targets he feels comfortable with. Obviously, he'll make the right decision and pull the trigger to whoever is open, but George Kittle has always been a guy he loves going to because George Kittle always comes down with the ball. George Kittle broke his record, I believe, last year for touchdowns in a single season, courtesy of Brock Purdy, and I expect that to get even better, even more elite, even more concrete as we move into the 2024 season. And it's because George Kittle, he's been out there all training camp. And you could see that instantaneously when they got some preseason snaps going up against the Raiders with George Kittle being in the game. And that connection is legit, especially that Brock Purdy dime that he threw, layered over the linebacker with the safety on the hip of George Kittle, floated it in there. George Kittle did what George Kittle does, goes up, grab the ball, and it was fucking sweet. So I expect great things coming from the Brock Purdy, George Kittle connection. And just mark my words, it's going to be the best that we've seen, which is saying a lot of mouths to feed. They've already had extreme amount of success, but I'm telling you, there's something different in the air with those two and the chemistry and the comfortability they have with each other. Obviously, that has comes with more and more reps, which they have gotten a lot of. And I expect them to be at the top of what we've witnessed thus far in their career. So I'm excited about that because Brock Purdy looked good, looked mobile. That interception, who gives a fuck? It was tipped. Deebo Samuel uncommonly stuck his hands out, but the ball bounced off. Normally he brings those down. And of course, at the very beginning of the game, we saw Brock Purdy throw a back shoulder dot to Deebo Samuel, set the tone and set the tone early because we all know Kyle Shanahan likes to get Deebo Samuel an opportunity to get the ball deep. And that was a sweet way to start the game. And so I've said this in other videos as well too. Deebo Samuel, he's going to have his best season. It's going to be a 2021 type season for Deebo Samuel. Best shape of his life. Looks clean as fuck in that number 1 jersey. Shout out number 1s. I used to wear number 1 when I played some football myself. So great minds think alike, but that's neither here nor there. And so expect eliteness coming out from Brock Purdy to Deebo Samuel and Brock Purdy to George Kittle. I'm excited about it. And I think there should be no doubt that Brock Purdy, he's going to hit the ground running. First off season, been all in training camp. He's going to hit the ground running. So watch out because he balled out last year and he looks like he is looking to surpass what he did last year going into this year. So I'm excited to witness that. And then outside of the all-pro quarterback, Brock Purdy himself, what's funny is Kyle Shanahan's gotten a lot of questions about the depth chart between Josh Dobbs, Brendan Allen, who's going to be QB2. Kyle Shanahan always coming back with kind of his normal saying, oh, they're competing for it, haven't made a decision yet. It's pretty obvious, maybe not obvious to a bunch of people, but definitely obvious to me. Josh Dobbs is going to be the number 2 quarterback. I think Brendan Allen is a solid player. He's been in the system. He understands how this offense operates. I think he likes being in San Francisco. And he's a good guy to have in the QB room without question. I like Brendan Allen being on the squad, but Josh Dobbs, he's been out there, hasn't had as good as training camp, according to reports. And I believe Kyle Shanahan's made some statements about it, but Josh Dobbs, what he shows on the field, his mobility, his desire to get in the end zone, some of the connections he's had on the deep ball with like Cowing. I think it's pretty obvious, at least to me, that Josh Dobbs is going to be QB2. I think that competition's been wrapped up. Josh Dobbs, QB2, Brendan Allen, QB3. Excited about that. As I pivot away from the quarterbacks, and I know I touched on Deebo Samuel a little bit earlier, but speaking about wide receivers, there's some excitement and also some concern around just the wide receiver room. Just as a group or as a whole, I'm concerned about, again, the depth as it relates to the wide receiver room. We haven't really seen much of Juwan Jennings. He's been nursing an injury. And then, of course, the biggest question mark, which reports continue to come out. All options are on the table for Brandon Aiyuk. Is he going to get traded? Is Washington back in? Because people are starting to bring that back up again, specifically Mike Silver, a longtime beat writer who's very well connected. So we don't know if Brandon Aiyuk's going to be there. I won't go into my whole spiel because I've done too many other videos around Brandon Aiyuk, and you have contradicting narrative coming out from Matt Mayoko, who's also very well connected, the longest 49er beat writer, that the optics look like they're close to getting a deal done.
I mean, the optics are that he's going to be with the team. Why else would the 49ers have him travel with the team to Vegas? But when I asked Kyle Shanahan about it after the game, he said, no, doesn't signal anything. He's on the team, so they expect their non-injured players to travel. Well, Brandon Aiyuk apparently has, a back issue, and that's why he hasn't been practicing. Obviously, we all know why he's not practicing. He doesn't have the contract.
Depending on when you watch this, Brandon Aiyuk could have already signed a long-term contract, or he could be traded. But if Brandon Aiyuk remains on the team, which I still believe is the highest likelihood, as we've witnessed from other players, regardless of position, getting off to a slow start because they had no reps in training camp because of obviously the ongoing contract issue. We saw it with Nick Bosa when he signed his deal. He's talked about it publicly. We saw it with Deebo Samuel after he signed his deal, not getting off to a fast start, not being their best seasons in general. And a lot of that has to do is because they didn't get any practice reps. And if you listen to any coach, any player, you get better from practice because you can't simulate the games. And so the best thing you can do, practice your craft and continue to build the chemistry with Brock Purdy. We know Brandon Aiyuk and Brock Purdy have chemistry, but I am very concerned that if and when the 49ers do sign Brandon Aiyuk to a long-term deal, and I'm sick of talking about it, that with all that money that's expected and rumored to come his way, to get off to a slow start with this team's current situation is not going to be ideal. And in all honesty, it's going to be nothing but infuriating if Brandon Aiyuk doesn't start balling out immediately like we've seen him do last year, because it is clear the wide receivers, we need weapons, specifically guys that can catch the vast majority of the balls that are thrown to them by Brock, as well as getting separation when he's running routes throughout the game, as well as the blocking component, which is obviously huge in the Shanahan offense. But Brandon Aiyuk is a concern that he is going to get off to a slow start. And not only have we seen it from Bosa and from Deebo, we also saw it with Fred. Fred's talked about it publicly. When he signed his big contract, he didn't have his best season. And I hope that is not something that remains to be a theme because of the way the 49ers negotiate their contracts. They're hard negotiators, which oftentimes bring delays to players get signed late, missing a lot or all of training camp, like Brandon Aiyuk's current situation, and then ultimately not having their best season, and more specifically, not getting off to a fast start. So I'm very concerned about the wide receiver room currently, just because there's not a whole lot of depth. And when we look at other receivers in the wide receiver room, outside of Juwan Jennings and Deebo Samuel, Brandon Aiyuk, we've seen absolutely nothing from the first round draft pick, Ricky Pearsall. And that is extremely frustrating, I'm sure, for him, for the team, for the fans. But as we all know, Kyle Shanahan is extremely hard on wide receivers. I mean, you listen to Kyle Shanahan talk about Cowing, who's been showing some unbelievable flashes and highlights of him playing good ball. And Shanahan and Lynch have both said relatively recently, he's still got a lot to work on. And I know some of that is you don't want to crown a rookie too soon and give him, massive amounts of respect. You still want him to get better and strive to get as best as they possibly can be. But the expectations for wide receivers under the Shanahan room is that bar is set very high. And with not seeing anything from Ricky Pearsall outside of a few practices within camp, I don't know what he is possibly going to be able to do to make an impact for the 49ers to get off to a hot start. We have seen in prior years, the 49ers get off to slow starts and then eventually pick it up. Whereas last year they got off to a smoking hot start, which was great. And they ultimately got the number one seed in the NFC, had a bye, made it to the Super Bowl. So that is something I'm sure Kyle Shanahan is harping on, not getting off to a slow start. But with all the players that have not been available, whether it's injury or contracts, I don't know how realistic it is for them to get off to that hot of a start when just people haven't been on the field together. And in football, that's a big deal. So, with Pearsall, who knows, initially thought that he was going to get some playing time in the last preseason game going up against the Raiders. But of course, he didn't. He's still battling a fucking shoulder injury. And earlier that he was battling with a hamstring. And then prior to that, still the initial shoulder injury that has still lingered and is something that's concerning. So I don't know. He may be potentially starting on IR, which again, not ideal, especially when you just look at the depth, the type of receivers that the 49ers have, what Pearsall could potentially bring to the 49ers, but yet just hasn't happened because of injuries. So I will say, outside of that concerning, I mentioned him already, but Cowing, that guy has been a bright spot, somebody that I think fans should be excited for. The 49ers, I'm sure, are excited for, at least definitely privately for sure, because he's shown with all the playing time he got in college, it is translating to the NFL without question, where he's fast as shit. He can run all the routes on the route tree, and he's made some great catches. And the dude just looks smooth out there. It doesn't look too big. It looks like he's meant to be in the NFL. And I'm excited to see what he can do in the regular season, because outside of the core players or the core receivers that I've already mentioned, he's the one that I could expect an impact from as a rookie immediately outside of anybody else. Players like Danny Gray, I've officially given up on outside of special teams. I don't know what has happened, but it seems like he can't find his footing in the building or in this team or in the NFL, whatever it is. Cowing, I think, is going to be a guy who's going to be required to step up and can make an immediate impact this season, as long as he just keeps going and doesn't have any more injuries that creep up, because that is what has held him up so far throughout training camp and the preseason. But he's been back, and the dude looks sweet. And then the most unattractive conversation is special teams. For those that remember Hightower, when he was a special teams coordinator, it wasn't great with Hightower. Ultimately, Kyle Shanahan had to let him go. I know he's still a special teams coordinator. I believe maybe Chicago. I'm not sure, but I know he's still around in the league. But it wasn't great under Hightower. And we have seen on multiple preseason games, and again, not putting too much stock into preseason, but still, I have bad memories of special teams debacles that has caused massive fuck ups in big time games, like the Super Bowl against the Chiefs, when Luter had a punt hit off his back foot and they recovered the football, or going back further, Kyle Williams fumbling a punt in a big game. And special teams has not been a bright spot really ever for the 49ers, at least from recent memory of what I can pull. And of course, we all saw preseason, the Raiders, they took a punt back to the house for a touchdown. And so that just brings it to the front of my mind. Yes, Guerrero had an unbelievable response to that with that dynamic kickoff where he took it 94 yards. I wish he was able to take it to the house, but that was sweet to watch, and it's good to see him back. But special teams, always concerned. And not even, I guess I should back up and say, not special teams as a whole. I'm specifically concerned about special teams coverage, because that is where the 49ers have had issues. With this group of players, just coverage issues. We saw some big returns in a couple of preseason games. And then of course the punt to the house by the Raiders, not great. They better figure it out, and figure it out fucking quick, because nothing makes Kyle Shanahan more irate than when special teams coverage gives up massive returns. So they need to clean that up without question. Work has to be done. But outside of the coverage, on the optimistic side, John Harbaugh talking about Jake Moody. There's 3 things in life that are guaranteed: death, taxes, and Jake Moody. And Jake Moody, he has looked super solid. We already know the guy can perform. The guy has a huge leg. Doesn't matter the game stage. We've seen him do it in the Super Bowl, Jake Moody, and he has continued to look so good, knocking down long field goals, kickoffs, looks great. So I would expect a big year for Jake Moody, just knocking down shots with that right leg. A Michigan man, you got to love it. I'm stoked. Jake Moody is on the 49ers. And then 2 last things as I start to wrap things up here. The 49ers defensive backs. I think it's pretty well documented. Other people have talked about it, so I won't go too nuts about it. I think without question, this is the best DB room the San Francisco 49ers have had under the Lynch and Shanahan era. You would think with John Lynch being an All-Pro, Hall of Fame, Super Bowl winning safety, that would have been an emphasis since they've gotten here. It really hasn't been, but they have seemed to find the right group of dudes, and the 49ers DBs look great. Diamador Lenore, Mooney Ward, you got 2 lockdown corners on the outside, which since the 49ers picked up Mooney from Kansas City, and he's only gotten better. Made All-Pro last year, and there's always been a question mark on the opposite side. Even when the 49ers had Richard Sherman, who was the corner on the opposite side, it was always kind of a rotating cast or a player that wasn't that great. There's always been somewhat of a question mark. But with Deommodore Lenoir and people talking about how he has been the star of the camp, like Brandon Aiyuk was last year, he's had his best camp. The dude's put in a ton of work. He clearly has been getting some value from Brandon Staley. And I think we got some lockdown corners. And then when you have to move Deommodore Lenoir inside playing nickel, which is not easy to do when you have to play both positions, that speaks to his intelligence, his dog mentality, just an absolute ball hawk and a beast. I feel very comfortable and secure with the 49ers because then who comes in? You got Renardo Green, I would assume is going to be the guy that plays opposite when they have to go into their nickel package. And Renardo Green, although a rookie, second-round draft pick from Florida, which, for those I didn't see, Florida lost, got upset number 10 in the country to Georgia Tech in Ireland. Hell of a win by Georgia Tech, but I digress. And so Renardo Green, he has shown flashes of being a lockdown corner. He's talked about it. He likes playing man-to-man coverage. So the DB room, specifically the corners, I feel very great about, and they should have tremendous success this year. And I believe should have probably their highest amount of interceptions that they've had throughout, again, the Shanahan era, just because Demo and Mooney, you got it locked down, and those dudes are dialed in. And then when you look at the safeties, it's kind of TBD with Huff. He was supposed to play or potentially was going to play this last preseason game. I don't know why, or if it's just me, but his injury has seemed to take a lot longer than most injuries. Maybe it's just me, but Huff's injury seems like that recovery period has been a long, long recovery period. But obviously an all-pro safety, once he gets back and in rhythm and has the conditioning and the callus of playing football, watch out. So I'm expecting even a bigger second half of the season while he ramps up for the 49ers defensive backfield, that they will be strong from the get off, but I expect them to be absolutely dominant and lock shit down once Huff starts getting back into the rhythm and inserted into the lineup. And then of course, Jair Brown, always a huge fan of, ball hawk, flies up, makes some big tackles, not afraid to throw his body out there. So Jair Brown and Huff, that's going to be a sweet fucking combo. And then Mustafa is waiting in the wings with another big hitter in the safety spot when we need him. Most excited I've been about the 49ers defense, specifically their DBs, since I can remember, definitely within the Shanahan Lynch era. And then the final thought, the 49ers running back depth. I think this is the most depth they've had collectively in the running back room in a long time. You got C-Mac. He'd be playing football if it was meaningful football to be played. I know the national media likes to make a bigger deal out of his calf injury that he's been nursing. If there was meaningful football, CMC would be playing there. The reigning offensive player of the year. So when he gets back and football, actual football is being played, C-Mac, the best in the business. But then on top of that, we have seen Jordan Mason he has gotten like 5x better than what we witnessed last year. And last year he was good, runs the ball hard, physical as shit. And he's gotten better, obviously, with catching the football in passing situations. And with him turning into the player he's becoming, the 49er depth is going to be unbelievable because they're going to feed Christian McCaffrey the ball without question. There's going to be a lot of it. Not as much as last year with the 300 plus touches that he got, but Christian McCaffrey, he's going to be on the field. We need him on the field. The 49ers need him on the field. But when he does have to come out to get some rest, Jordan Mason, Elijah Mitchell, you can't get much better of a situation with player options that you can have coming in to replace Christian McCaffrey as he takes a breather. And so the running back room looks dynamic and looks like they're going to have an unbelievable season as well. And then finally, the offensive line. I won't get into it that much. They're good, not great. We've seen some promise coming out from Apuni at the guard position, but then of course, Trent Williams, still the one that's not there and the one that is most needed. So once he gets back, he's a player I'm not concerned about getting off to a slow start because he's done it for just too damn long. So I'm excited about that. All right, y'all. Those are just my thoughts about the preseason. I'll be back, but until my next video, like, comment, subscribe. You know the deal. Hit me up. Peace.